I'm in a space where I feel like, totally open about where I am spiritually. There's no disconnect, there's no shame attached to it. And I really am of the mindset that, it's up to you as an individual to really explore what spirituality means to you. Everyone has their own interpretation, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's the way it should be, because it shouldn't be identical to anyone else. That's how I feel anyway. But yeah, I find different ways to express my spirituality, and most recently it's been through sound, which is interesting, and also light language.
You are listening to Dream and Do, a podcast for big-hearted creatives. My name is Nicola Ray Wickham, and I'm a creative coach and strategist obsessed with helping people just like you to amplify your voice, center your creativity and wellness, and make a real, meaningful contribution to the world. Your whole self is welcome to this table, and you're invited to pull up a chair and join me for pep talks, soulful insights, and practical tips on all things creativity, marketing, truth-telling, and story sharing, and powerful conversations with amazing, wholehearted humans who are dreaming and doing in action and disrupting the status quo as they go. This is the stuff you're going to wish you knew years ago, but don't worry, we're doing this in community. You are not alone, and it's not too late. This is our time. Hey loves, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. How are you? I hope all is well in your world, and I'm coming to you with a beautiful episode where I'm joined by Jazreena Harlow. This episode was recorded in late 2020, so just giving that as a warning, because all of my conversations are rooted in context, right? So we're very much talking in where we were then, but it is no more less valuable. And actually, I think that passage of time from then to now serves as a really interesting point of reflection for us all. So Jazreena, the wonderful woman that she is, she's a dynamic soul coach and she's a crystal sonic sound healer. I have been lucky enough to be at and experience quite a few of her sound bath sessions. She runs them with the full moon and new moon, and yeah, I've really, really enjoyed them, and they always help stuff to rise to the surface, things that have been going on underneath to rise to the surface and for dots to be connected, which is always glorious. She helps women to power walk into their vision with purpose and poise. And in this episode, we talk about what self-discovery journeys look like, right? And it's funny, online, there's a real gloss on a self-discovery journey, but what we all know when we're in it is that it's not glossy, and it's messy, and it's uncomfortable at times, and it's stretchy, and yeah, it's all of the things that we don't often see or get told and get airplay, and we're giving it airplay in this conversation. We both share our stories. Jazz really dives into hers, which is great, and I know that you're going to get so much from it. So before I hand over to this episode, I need to let you know that my coaching practice is open for some more wonderful, creative, big-hearted humans to enter in and work with me one-to-one. As some of you will know that I've been fully booked pretty much since the start of the year, and I'm now opening up to start with folks in the autumn. So if you're thinking that you could do with one-to-one support, then hit me up, DM me on Instagram, send me an email, and let's chat to see if we are a good fit. My coaching practice is one of creativity and compassion, and I really dive into pure coaching in that way of helping you to really get to where you want to do, but using yourself, right? It is the most empowering journey. And then for those of you that have brands that you want to build, then we also dive into the creative strategy side as well. Some of you might be like, no, it's just the pure coaching that I need. It's about that side of things, the purpose and finding myself home, kind of coming home to me. And we can do that one-to-one. And then we can also, if you have a heart-led vision, values aligned brand that you want to grow, then we can incorporate the creative strategy side as well. So, okay, on to the episode. Enjoy, my love.
Jazz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
I've been good. Going through just life like everyone else, and taking all the collective energy and figuring out what's kind of going on in my inner world too. So yeah, I'm good, but life's been vibrant. Let's just put it that way.
You're telling me. Vibrant is the word. Vibrant is the word. Tell me about your 2020. I mean, I know that 2020 has been like it's been but tell me what it's looked like for you.
2020 started really well, actually. I had just gone through my training in different coaching modalities, or kind of like finishing that up, and also just started sharing with the world about sound healing and my journey with that. And I was all nervous about it, putting it out into the world, because that was quite a new journey for me, and also kind of expressing so much more about my spirituality and kind of how I navigate life. That was a new vulnerable space for me in sharing that in that way. So yeah, it really started off with me just being open to expand and grow as a human being, and as a mother, and as a wife, and just a person. And yeah, February kind of took off with me doing a couple of sound bath sessions and holding them in person, when that was a thing. And we got to March, and then everything just kind of like went into lockdown, and I was just really to be honest, I had been doing my coaching stuff and doing my vision workshops via the sistership from the year before, but really kind of going into one-to-one work and establishing myself as a coach and incorporating sound with that. So it was just the start of that journey, and really kind of embracing that and moving it forward. And then it was just like, well, no more of that, we're going to have to lock that down. And the world just went into a bit of hysteria, didn't it? This is when everyone was like buying up toilet paper and all that craziness going on, and trying to navigate life in a newfound normal was quite interesting. I feel like I took it on quite well, actually, when everything was a bit like mad hysteria, and I think that was because I've been doing a lot of like self-work and trying to stay calm through it all and not get too kind of washed up within it all. But I think it knocked everyone for six around that time. It was very energetically draining. And I think I came off social media for about 3 weeks at that time as well, because it was just too much. Yeah.
That was probably one of the best things to do, right?
Yeah. For sure, 100%. So then we kind of got over that roller coaster, and then it all started to go a bit crazy again, and especially within our world, within the Black community, around like end of May, June time now, wasn't it, when everything kind of come to a head with the murder of George Floyd. And I went into a phase of a state of anger, actually, which really surprised me, and it opened up my throat chakra, and I was being very vocal about things, and found a new, I guess, sense of voice, and a new sense of self within that. Whilst it was really, really like tough and traumatic, it was also cathartic and quite healing in a way that I didn't think would have come from that. It was just crazy. And then just kind of maybe not stepped back so much, but really I guess it settled. I was in sort of embodying that new sense of voice, and constantly expanding. That's what I would say about 2020. 2020 has been a whole journey of just growing, expanding, layers and layers of healing.
I know, right? Sometimes I'm like, can I heal anymore?
are we done yet? And it's like, no.
Another big old layer.
Yeah. Especially with things that you feel like you've worked on. It always like blows my mind how many layers there are to these things, or just caveats to it that you just kind of like haven't seen before, and new revelation. So yeah, it's been interesting, been wild, but in a really good way. And I'm actually really grateful for this year. Like super, super grateful. And I know not a lot of people will resonate with that, because I understand it's been very tough. It's been rough and in varying degrees for everyone. But I have just been like, yeah, this has been the year that was needed and necessary.
I know, right? That really, really resonates. I did a session in my membership last night. It was a guided journaling session, and I just shared with them what came up for me. And one of my questions was really simple. It was just like, how do you feel? And as I was writing, it was like, I feel tired but alive. I feel well but depleted.
Yeah.
Like, it was all of the opposites, but existing in this very moment, in this space. And I was sharing that it's like, that is my 2020, that it's all of the feelings being allowed to coexist. And actually that's the feeling of wholeness.
Yeah.
And that's, I really resonate with what you say about
yeah, that's perfect. Like, it really is about, you know, coexisting with all of these feelings. Like, you are supposed to be here full-bodied, being your whole self and experiencing the whole spectrum of humanity. Like, we're not supposed to fit in all labels and boxes and just be a certain way. Like, we're supposed to embrace all of that. And this year was definitely teaching us ways to embody that and do that. It's not easy ever, but, you know, it's necessary.
That leads me on, actually, something I wanted to ask you about, because you worked in fashion, didn't you?
Oh my God, yes.
When I found out you worked in fashion, I was like, our trajectories are so similar. And that notion of this year being a year where we've been able to step into like coexisting with our whole selves, especially for those of us that have come from a place where we maybe couldn't have done.
Yeah.
What was your experience of like getting into fashion, working in fashion? What did it look like for you?
So getting into fashion. So whilst when I was in school, I loved art, textiles, and I just kind of went down that trajectory because it just felt good to me. I never really knew what I wanted to do, to be honest. Well, even when I was in college, I was like unsure, but I just went with what I enjoyed, and I felt like that was important. And my parents were very much just like, do what makes you happy. They were never pushy about a specific, you know, career. They just wanted us to, you know, be happy and stress free and not, you know, worry about anything. So I'm really grateful that they were that way, because it allowed me to be really creatively expressive. So in the end, I decided to do fashion design. So I did a fashion design degree, and during my degree, or should I say the last year of my degree, I don't think I've actually shared this out with you before, but, you know, it's you, Nicola, I'll share everything today. When you do like your final collection, you kind of come together and you do your fashion show, right? So I studied in Birmingham, and we weren't part of like one of the top fashion universities. So we didn't do like London Fashion Week type thing, but we did our own. And there was like, everyone would get selected, or you would actually just think that everyone got into the end of the final show. But I didn't get selected alongside, I think there was about 7 of us. And at the time when I was going through it, it cottoned on to me that the 7 of us were all either black or ethnic minorities. And I think there was only like one white girl who didn't get in. And I then kind of like had to sit with...
This is out of how many students?
There would have been about 30 of us, 36, yeah.
Wow.
Maybe a little less, but it was like, it was visible.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think back the other day about this, especially when everything kicked up with, you know, Black Lives Matter and me reassessing and evaluating like life and where I found myself. I remember at the time questioning it, and I did question my tutors, and they kind of came back and was like, no, I feel like there's some racial bias here because everyone who's not in this show is of colour. And I didn't pursue it because in the end I was very much like, that doesn't define me. I'm really not going to be told that I'm not good enough because I wasn't conceptual enough. Like, I loved making beautifully tailored clothes, and that was just my thing. And it was a lovely collection, but it wasn't, you know, in your face, fashion darling, like, you know, spikes coming out of here and glitter thrown everywhere and all that type of stuff. It was just well made, nice clothes, like anyone could wear it. So that was quite hard hitting for me, knowing that I then had to like graduate and then go into the world of wanting to be a fashion designer and not being selected to be in the final show, which was like, ugh. But during that time, I worked really closely with a Birmingham-based designer and did lots of work experience with him. He was like from South Africa, and he did a couple of shows at London Fashion Week. And he was lovely. Like, he took me on. I worked in his studio. He did a fashion show and then let me do mine with him.
Amazing.
And so I was just like, I'm going to create a table for myself. Like, I don't need uni, whatever. And then obviously I had to go in the big wide world and start looking for jobs and stuff. And so I didn't end up in fashion design in the end because, as you know, that world is so competitive, right? I think I applied for, I don't even know how many jobs I applied for. I just know it was a lot. And then ended up getting into fashion buying instead by a very prestigious brand who I actually don't remember applying for. So divinely it just kind of happened, and then I moved down to London for that. I worked in fashion buying, started as a buyer's assistant, worked my way up to a buyer or junior buyer, stroke buyer, and then decided to leave the UK and move to Amsterdam to work for another brand based in Amsterdam, and lived out there for 2 years. And Remy was born then, so I moved like country with like a 1.5-year-old, which seemed like, yeah. We just were like, okay, let's do this. Like, this is what life's about. Let's experience it. It was a big move. We were just like, if it doesn't work, we come back. Like, I think they were probably a bit naive about it, to be honest, but in a good way. We were like, if it doesn't work.
18-month-old in a different country and working. Like, I understand any element of that.
Yeah.
All of them together. Right?
Yeah. Do you know what? It actually wasn't that bad. Like, I'm expecting myself to be like, no, it's really tough. It wasn't. Do you know what? Amsterdam was just a great city to live in. The company that I worked for were, even though, you know, typically fashion, ridiculous hours and all of that, were pretty chilled. And I think that's because Amsterdam is, you know, Dutch people are chilled anyway. My husband actually wasn't working for the first 6 months because even though his skills were transferable, so he was an electrician, if you didn't speak Dutch, they wouldn't let you do like work. So he had to like start speaking the language, and I was lucky enough that my salary covered off him not having to work. And there was
that's perfect then. So childcare was covered.
Exactly. And there was a really great tax benefit, so I could kind of, you know, that worked out well for us. So he actually spent like 6 months of just him and Remy, which was beautiful because it's so rare
in a different country as well. What an experience.
And it was really kid friendly out there, and there was just like lots to do, and it just suited us really, really well. I'm so glad we just did it and we went for it. But we ended up coming back, one because, you know, 2 years into Liam not really being able to get into, you know, he had his own career and he was starting to get a bit bored, which was rightly so. And also, you know, family coming, like missing them and stuff. And even though it was like an hour on a plane,
but still it's
you miss fam. So we came back. Then we moved into North London. I started working in South London and fell pregnant with Zane. So this was kind of like the last stint of the fashion, the fashion element, you know, doing school runs whilst heavily pregnant, and then doing like an 1.5-hour commute on the underground, and just, you know what that's like. It wasn't fun. But overall, like career-wise for me, I felt like I started to lose myself towards the end of it. It was just, you know, the perception of fashion is like so creative, you know, fashion darling, blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, oh, I don't feel like I'm being myself. Like, I'm just, you know, when you're working for a brand, it's all about the brand. It's all about them, their image, whatever. And any ideas that I wanted to bring to the table, especially within buying, had to be like, you know, proven to the nth degree, the analysis that you had to do, all the different like people that you had to speak to, the departments to get like sign offs and pre-meets about pre-meets and meetings about meetings. And I was like, oh my God, I am not saving lives here. You know, I don't want to be, it was just, and the long hours as well, the expectation to just be hanging around in an office for like hours because you've got to sign off and there's no like compensation for your time.
One of the things that I love about working for myself is the sign-off process. It's like me and me.
Yeah.
Having worked in places where the sign-off process is literally, by the time it comes back to you, you've forgotten what it was. All around the houses.
I know.
Changed a million times.
Yeah.
And you've just lost all enthusiasm and energy for it. It looks completely different, but that is just,
that's the way it is. But you know what's crazy is you mentioned that kind of working for yourself, it's just you. I find remnants of that stays with me, that corporate world. So like sometimes I find myself like over analysing things or second guessing it, and I'm like, no, Jazz, this is your decision. You can give yourself permission. It's okay. No one needs to sign it off.
In the morning.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what made you get from fashion to what you're doing now? Like when you were in fashion and that jazz, were you aware of your spiritual side then, or were you on that journey?
Yeah, no, I was very aware. I don't think I was open about it, but I was definitely aware. So today it's quite interesting. It's 20 years since I was hit by a car when I was 16.
Oh my goodness.
Today, the very day today. So today's like a celebration of life for me, because I always just like, this day obviously stands out for obvious reasons. And my spiritual journey really kind of like amplified at that point, because, you know, when you nearly lose a life, you question everything. And I was just like, oh my gosh, you know, what would have happened if I'd like passed, and like where would I have gone, and all of those questions came up. And I wasn't raised in church. I was definitely raised to be God-fearing. So, you know, we all believed in God, but we weren't raised in church. And that was the turning point for me. I actually ended up like, my closest friends at the time were raised in church and they would go to church every Sunday. And I kind of, like went along with the ride on that, because I was just like, I want some answers about something that's much bigger than me. And I always had that connection anyway. I never felt like I didn't. I just didn't have anyone to maybe confirm that to. So I ended up going to church and became a born-again Christian when I was like 17, 18, like, yeah. Okay. Which is quite different, I imagine. Like for most people, they're like raised in it, but I kind of, embarked on it through that journey. And then shifted out of it probably around the age of like 22, 23, because whilst I felt really connected, like spiritually, and I felt like I had my own relationship with God. At the time I'd term it God, Jesus. Now it's more like source, universe. I just have a different like, you know, understanding of it now personally. But it resonates so much with me in that sort of religious state, in that environment, because I felt guilt, shame. I felt a lot of hypocrisy. I was like in a young, obviously, relationship with my husband at the time, and things like sex before marriage was just so like taboo, and me kind of being on that journey found it so confusing and really conflicting. So I was, you know, made peace with the fact that I just have my own relationship with God, and I didn't feel like it needed to be within the parameters of church anymore. So I stepped away. When I fell pregnant with Remy, or actually just after Remy was born, I kind of like had another spiritual awakening. During that time, my grandma passed away, like actually 4 weeks before Remy was born. And then I just kept on getting all of these signs. I would see feathers everywhere and the number 111. And I was like, what is this? And when I started looking into it, it was like, you know, saying that might have been potentially my grandmother trying to like communicate with me. Like I felt like that was like a portal being open alongside me giving birth. Like that whole experience of giving birth was just so it was traumatic, but in many other ways, it was very spiritually and deeply kind of like, yeah, this whole new like human being that I had to look after and love and care for. And so that opened up another layer for me spiritually. And yeah, it just then kind of continued in its own way. And there's many parts of it that I suppressed at the time, but lots of parts of it I embraced. And I now feel like I'm in a space where I feel like, you know, totally open about where I am spiritually. There's no like disconnect, there's no like shame attached to it. And I really am of the mindset that, you know, it's up to you as an individual to really explore what spirituality means to you. Like everyone has their own interpretation, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's the way it should be, because it shouldn't be identical to anyone else. That's how I feel anyway. But yeah, I find different ways to express my spirituality, and most recently it's been through sound, which is interesting, and also light language.
Yeah, I remember a post from you last year. Was it last year?
Yeah.
And you were like, it was quite a vulnerable post. It was like, and you could tell like you were sharing for the first time about it, and I was like, ooh. It's so interesting. Like, I feel really honoured that you're still doing this interview today on such a important day of celebration, right? Like, so I just want to honour that and say thank you, and to hear your journey, how it's tracked through from being 16 to being here is just
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Tell me about light language.
Oh my God. So it's funny because, you know what, I call it light language because that's the term that I feel like resonates with me the most. But to be honest, when I was in church, obviously there's the term of speaking in tongues. Like, I spoke in tongues, so that's normal, like in church environments. I do remember feeling or thinking at the time, though, when I spoke in tongues, it sounded different, but then I think everyone speaks differently anyway. But I was just a bit like, oh, okay, the world of comparison, just checking out what everyone else is doing, right?
Always there.
Yeah. So it felt totally comfortable in a church environment because it was normal. And then obviously when I stepped away from that, the speaking part wasn't an issue. But after having Remy, one day, I don't know what, I can't even remember where I was like emotionally. Clearly, I think I was just having like a bit of a bad day. And I remember just picking up a pen and writing, and English did not come out. It was just this like script of something. And I was like, what the hell? What the hell? What the hell is that? What? And I just put the pen down and I was like, no. I did not understand where that came from, but it just flowed out of me. It wasn't like, it was really emotional as well. It just literally just flowed out on the paper, and I was like, okay. And then every so often I would have moments where I felt like I needed to write like that, and I would write it on little post-it notes and then just put it down. And, you know, I was in the era of Google. So this was 2012, right? So Google's, you know, there. But I was like, what is this? I don't even know what to put into Google. Like, what is this?
I don't even know what to Google.
I don't know what to call this. I can't even Google it, even though I know what it is. So I left it for a while. I didn't even talk about it to anyone because I was just like, okay, that's really strange. And it came up again, I want to say 2000 and where are we, 2020, right? So this has got to be about 4 years ago at least. I would constantly see numbers all the time and all of that. And one day, that was it. So this is a really cool story. We bought Remy a telescope for his birthday. And we don't know why, because he really wasn't interested in it. He just was like, I want one. We bought him, he never looked at it, ever.
Those presents that you get for like you, really, but for them.
Exactly. So then one day, me and Leon were like, oh my God, should we use the telescope? Should we actually just look into the stars and whatnot? Like, because we bought him a constellation book and everything. And so we started looking up into the stars, and we noticed that we could see like the Orion belt. It was a really clear night. And I remember I was in this group called Indigo 11, and they were talking about this star called Sirius and blah, blah, blah. We're getting quite deep now. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder if we can see Sirius. So it's this like the brightest star next to the Orion belt. And I could see it. It was just, I was like, that's amazing. How cool is that? And I looked at my phone or my watch. I think I had my Apple Watch at the time. And it was like 11 minutes past 1. in the morning. It was like in the morning. And I was like, okay, what? And at that time, I kind of like understood the notion of, you know, synchronicities or like coincidences. And I then went into Google and typed serious language. So random. Just like whatever that, literally I was just like, type in serious language. And then I saw, you know, when you search the images, I saw writing that looked just like mine.
No way.
I swear to you.
I'm literally at the edge of my seat listening to this.
Oh, it blew my mind. I was like, what? And then the term light language came up. So then I knew that's what I had been writing all this time. And that just expanded my whole spiritual journey. I was just like, whoa.
How did you feel though on...
I shat myself, I'm not going to lie. I was like, all right, okay, this spiritual stuff is like, you know, not for the faint-hearted. But yeah, I was just like, okay. And then that was it. Then it was funny because the doors just opened and I found other people that, you know, obviously now I knew what it was. It wasn't uncommon at all, but it was still quite like, what is this? So that was, I would say, yeah, it was around 2016, 15, 16. And that's when I started finding people on Instagram that spoke like language. So I don't know if you know, and do you follow And Crystals? Katie Jane. She's amazing. She sells crystals, but she also speaks like language. And I saw her speaking it on Instagram and I was like, oh, finally there's someone that I can talk to about this, because I was like, I feel really weird and not normal about it. And now I'm just like, whatever. Everyone's speaking like language now. Everyone's like doing their own expressions of it. And it really, for me, like language is actually just a language of the soul. Like, I don't even know whether like language is the right term, but everyone has their own, and not everyone has access to it or needs to. But yeah, that's just been a process for me. And so that now kind of comes into my artwork as well as everything else. So it's interesting.
So it comes into your artwork. How else does it?
I feel like it's probably been in my artwork for some time, but I didn't recognize it like as a thing. Genuinely through artwork, it would just be like, I will have a feeling about something or visualization. I'll just draw it out and it just comes in different ways. It doesn't come all the time, but there'll be moments where I'm just like churning out imagery, and I don't share them as much as I probably should. I keep on getting told that I should share it more, but you know, we take baby steps with these things. Through sound. So when I'm playing, sometimes I intuitively play. I may not sing it, but I can hear it in my head. So I'll be playing intuitively around that. Yeah, mainly through written form and art form. I speak it less outwardly because I'm somebody who also wants to be able to interpret to some degree or have an understanding of what I'm saying, and there are many people who do understand it and I don't. I just feel it, and I think I'm naturally that type of person anyway. I sense and feel a lot. I often say when I can't express myself, I don't have the words, so I trust that what I'm saying is like just coming from the heart.
Wow, this is like on a personal level really fascinating to me. Really fascinating, because I'd seen you talk about it, and to be honest, I'd not really heard about it before then.
Yeah,
my spiritual journey, I suppose, is more, I don't know if the right word is conventional, in the sense that, which makes it sound like language isn't, but it's been more the standard stuff.
Yeah, I hear you. People share that more, don't they? And they feel
exactly.
Yeah.
And also this feels more channeled. This feels more chosen. Right? Yeah. There's something about this that feels more, there's a lot of like more general spirituality that you can access because you choose to be open.
Yeah, of course.
Whereas this feels more, and I find it fascinating.
Yeah,
so does it come into the work that you do at all, or?
So a few times I have done like language readings for people. This is when I was kind of like experimenting what it's about. I had a couple of friends that I felt like I had a message to share to them. And that's always been part of my journey as well. Like someone will come up in my mind and I'm like, I need to tell them something, and I'll share something with them and they'll be like, how did you know? Or yes, I've been working through that. So that's been like a side of me that I have also like suppressed over the years, But then I've got more confident in just kind of saying, like, I have a message for you, and not be weirded out by it at all. I did a couple of like language readings for friends, and it would just be like written form, and I shared it with them, and they all were like, I don't know what this means, but it literally has touched me like somewhere within my DNA, and I understand it, but I can't tell you what I understand. It just resonated with them, and many people have been like, it's familiar to me, like I know this. So that's how, like, I just know it's like just heart and soul language. Like, it's not something that you necessarily have to understand or try interpret or kind of like, you know, put a label or words to it, because that's quite new for us as well as human beings, I believe. You know, language and communication is not, it's like a latter part of who we were. So a lot of, I guess, of that comes from just knowing how we originally sort of communicated and what we understand about ourselves without having to explain it in any way.
Yeah, and what I love as well is that notion of, like, obviously mindset stuff. We can talk all day about that. And then in terms of like even what we embody, but this feels even deeper than that. There's like that other part where you're saying that people are like, this feels familiar. And I definitely felt that when I've experienced your sound healing. There was something in it that was like, oh yeah, this feels like coming home. You know, and it's like, this doesn't feel completely new to me, but I don't know why, because I've never heard it before. But there's that sense of familiarity that is that deeper stuff.
It is. And I think, you know, specifically with sound, it really is, that familiarity feels so resonant. It's because it really is bringing you back to the truest, like, core of you. You know, sound, the way that it works vibrationally on an energetic level is it tries to take you back to your most harmonic resonance. And for us all, that is like the spark of life, like where we were created, like the start, like the connection to source. And I think that's why it feels so familiar to a lot of people. Not everybody enjoys sound as well. You know, for some people it's just like, no, this doesn't feel good for me. And that's them having to just work through their own stuff, because, you know, we have layers and layers of things that we have to work through, especially on an energetic level, which most of us are not aware of, that we're dealing with things, you know, on an energetic and cellular level. We, like you just said, you know, we can talk to the mindset stuff all day, which is equally as important. It's not like it's not at all. But we, you know, are walking around like, you know, blocked in so many places, and we're just not aware because we don't have that. It's not taught in schools.
No.
In society, it's still quite a taboo subject, you know. The notion of like neuroscience and metaphysics is still kind of like, what is this? So it will resonate for a lot of people, but it's hard to explain in so many ways as well.
It's something you've got to experience.
For sure. Yeah.
Something that I've been exploring more, especially through this podcast series, is coaching industry. Take a deep breath when I say that.
Yes.
White supremacy and privilege, and just where it sits within the systemic and structural conditions. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh,
I know that's a big question.
Let's break this down in there. So first of all, I think, obviously I call myself a coach, right? I hate labels, I really do. And it's annoying because within the field that we are in, we have to be able to communicate and tell people what we do and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I'm multifaceted, I'm multi-passionate, I love all angles of it. And so kind of putting myself in this coach box feels quite restrictive sometimes, but, you know, I allow myself to just push through that barrier. Coaching and white supremacy, or I guess, you know, the impact of how that kind of works within our field and within the community, Black community specifically, yeah, I find that quite challenging. I spoke a lot about this, especially around the month of June, just talking about how it is harder, I feel, for Black women, Black men to, not even just coaching, actually in therapy as well, you know, find access, good access to coaches that really understand what we go through. It's so multi-layered and so complex, and the things I think we have had to navigate growing up, and I can only talk from a UK perspective, obviously, being raised with the mind concept, or the concept that we have to work harder because we kind of did, and there are different, you know, barriers for us to kind of come through. And in the coaching industry, you know, a lot of the notion is around like just have a positive mindset and you can kind of like just think your way out of things, but actually there's layers to this. There's so many layers to it for us. I find it challenging, but I'm also wanting to be someone who pushes through that. And, you know, I try and help a lot through my work by explaining how we work on a human level, then adding in the additional stuff that the Black community have to go through, and then talk about the energy side, and then talk about all the other kind of like, you know, prejudices and systematic racism that kind of happens, and like weave that all through my work. And it is quite challenging. It's frustrating in a lot of ways, because I feel like what we deliver is really important to be shared and be amplified and put out there. But, you know, we're still working through that. This industry is very, very whitewashed, and I've seen changes, but, you know, obviously that will take time. And I personally, I'm just like so grateful for people like you specifically as well, who I really look up to, and is always raising the bar for making these conversations still relevant and putting it out there whilst you're working through these things as well. Because I feel like I shared my voice even in a small way, but I still struggle with sharing it even more so, especially with all the different layers that I kind of like, we all have our own stuff that we deal with, but spiritually, and then obviously just being a mom, and then, you know, being a Black woman, and just adding everything else within the mix, like it's a lot. But I'm happy to be in this industry because it's necessary and it's needed. And, you know, in my family, there's, you know, a lot of my family members suffer with mental illness, and it's something that I definitely want to speak on more, but I'm also aware that the stories that I may share are not my own, and I'm conscious of that. You know, it's about maintaining safety and being, you know, we have to think about not overexposing ourselves, which is not something that everyone has to think about, right? So it's complex. It's so complex, but I'm also really grateful to be in this space and be able to, you know, work through ways collectively and individually to push through those barriers, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, because I know it's a big question, and but it's an important one. And I think that just by your presence, our presence in the industry says so much. And you know what? I'm proud of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's been a real journey of amplifying one's voice whilst also experiencing the trauma of it. So it's like what we were talking about before I pressed record, about like you're doing the work whilst doing the work.
Yeah.
Whilst doing the work. It's so layered.
Yeah, for it to be a lived experience alongside having to share and talk about it, it's just it's not easy. The levels of vulnerability within that as well, and deciphering it all, and having to deal with the gaslighting and like all of that, you know, stepping up and having a voice means that you're also likely to be, you know, attacked in ways that you're just like, I don't have time for this. I don't have the energy for this. I don't have time for this. Some things are non-negotiable. But also learning as well. One thing on time, George Floyd's murder is what really kind of I found challenging was recognizing that a lot of white people had an awakening within that moment too, like, you know. And I struggled with that because I was like, I don't understand. But then I wouldn't, because I'm not, you know, I've not had that experience. But like also wanting reluctantly to have compassion for that too, because for me I'm just like, well, why not, but I'm also like, I understand the spectrum of the world that we live in, and there are going to be elements that people just don't get because they've never experienced it. And do I expect them to have that? You know, all I can do is just like live my experience and hold space for myself, because that's important. And then, you know, people will just sort of figure that out. But I definitely found that so jarring, so jarring. Yeah, this new kind of like newfound awareness that I was just like, what? I don't, what?
I've been here.
Yeah, I don't understand. Maybe I've not seen this before, but yeah, it was just real, and everything was amplified then, wasn't it? Because, you know, we'd all been in our homes and like going through this, you know, the whole motion with COVID, and there was not like no place to hide for any of us, uncomfortable or not, you know. It's quite interesting actually, the whole concept of like no place to hide, because 2020 has definitely like exposed and opened so many doors, and we're just like, you know, we've got 3 months left now, what else is there to come?
I know, right? There's still stuff though, isn't there, that keeps it's
so much stuff. But, you know, having spoken to a lot of people, and also like with coaching my clients and stuff, like the big like revelation for a lot of people during this time has been like where they've recognized where they haven't been valuing themselves, where they really understand the depths of how unhappy they are, how much they are not in tune with themselves, how disconnected they are from themselves and others. And this kind of like, you can't hide, like 2020 vision, like the, you know, the lens is on us all to figure our shit out in whatever which way it's supposed to be like figured. And it's been tough. That's like, I feel like the massive lesson for us all is really remember who you are, come back to yourself, come back to center, because through all of this craziness, like, you can only hold on to yourself. If you're struggling to do that, it's been a really, really hard time. Yeah.
That's the only constant, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about the divine call, which is like the best name for a program ever.
Oh my God. Well, that's such a lovely lead into that, actually, because essentially that is it. It's an 8-week program of where you literally cannot hide from yourself, you know? So it's this deeper kind of healing journey experience where sound is the focus, like sound healing is the focus, but we work through the chakras. So we start from the earth star chakra all the way up to the crown, and we work on a chakra each week, and we set an intention of like reflection, awareness, learnings, and really trying to move through the things that are blocking us. So energetically, obviously sound works through that, but just curiosity and vulnerability is just like the added dose that's really important to really work through those things. Because what I found, like I said earlier, like working with clients, is like they just don't feel settled, they feel disconnected, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, they feel stuck. And really, when you feel stuck and you're like scared and you don't know where to move, is when you don't feel like you know who you are. Or you're not expressing or being able to explore a sense of creativity, because creativity really is what makes you, right? You learn so much from that. So yeah, it's a deep healing journey for 8 weeks, going through all the chakras, and it's going to be supported by a beautiful container of friends who I absolutely adore and do like various amazing things. So, you know, Layla. So Layla's going to be part of the journey.
Amazing.
And she is providing recipes, herbal recipes and tonics to support the chakra each week. So like you feel guided through it, and she'll be talking about the seasonalities and how the outside world is also a reflection of our inner world, right? You know, everything that's happening outside of us is also like a mirror. So to, you know, support and guidance through that. We have an astrologer who's going to be focusing on Lilith in birth charts, because no one really focuses on that. And Lilith is actually a reflection of, you know, the shadow self. And the things that we don't really want to touch on about ourselves.
I've been doing so much shadow work this last few months. It's been like so confronting.
Yeah. So but it moves you forward so much once you accept that, right? It's so important. So there'll be an element of that. Somatic movement. My lovely friend Leslie, she is a somatic movement therapist, and so like really tapping into body wisdom and intuition, and like just feeling when things don't feel right in your body. Like there's so much wisdom in that, and we just ignore it every single day. So I feel like that's important. My friend Steph is an energy healer, and she works a lot in like ancestral lineage. And she also does a lot of channeling with like spirit guides and ascended masters, so that will be interesting. And then I also have a friend who does sacred geometry, and her artwork is just amazing, really, really beautiful, and it activates me in some way. And I was just like, your work needs to be shared. She's based in Germany. I've never met her, but we've like, you know, found a friendship on IG. So yeah, like this really supportive container just to help flow through all of that, to have different aspects and, you know, diversity in healing, you know, a real rounded way, like back to nature, to spirit, to the cosmos, to your own body, and that connection is really...
sounds like an energetic MOT.
Yeah,
that's
literally
what it sounds like like all the, from the chakras to all everything. And it feels like when I think of your work, that's what I think of.
Bring you back to yourself. So you can't hide from all of the, you know, there's always going to be layers of things, isn't there? But I think it's having a moment to reflect and do that, I think is like, is so empowering, and, you know, being able to remember your own power and your own divinity is just something that we all need to access during this time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, my love, for being here, and thank you for creating your own tables wherever you've gone on your journey. The world's a better place for it.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to say, like, you are amazing, Nicola, and you know, I know that I've been able to share my voice because you've led that as well. So I hope you know that has been like really important to me.
Thank you.
So we can go off and cry now.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'm going to get emotional.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. Please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review and rating, as it helps this important conversation and message get to more people. Also, please feel free to share it with anyone who you think needs to hear it. I'll see you on the next